Under the glittering lights of old Hollywood, where glamour reigned supreme and every smile was sculpted for the cameras, few suspected what secrets lay behind closed doors. To the world, these stars embodied perfection, flawless beauty, boundless talent, unshakable confidence. But away from the red carpets and flashbulbs, some of them surrounded themselves with things that revealed the cracks in that perfection. This is the story of the Golden Age celebrities whose private collections were as strange and disturbing as the fame that consumed them. They weren't just keepsakes or eccentric hobbies, they were mirrors of obsession, trauma, and decay. Fame does strange things to the human mind. It isolates, amplifies, and distorts. For the stars of Hollywood's Golden Age, those polished idols of the 1930s through the 1960s, the studio system controlled every aspect of their public image. They weren't people anymore, they were commodities, and in that loneliness, many of them turned inward. Some collected artifacts of their own suffering, others the remnants of mortality, or things that symbolized control when everything else was spiraling out of reach. Behind the curtains of Beverly Hills mansions and hotel suites, these stars built shrines to their private demons. And when those collections were discovered, often after their deaths, they revealed more about Hollywood's mental toll than any scandal ever could. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. Howard Hughes, the Empire of Decay. Howard Hughes was a titan, an inventor, aviator, and film producer who seemed to embody American genius. But beneath his brilliance, a dark obsession festered. In his later years, Hughes surrounded himself not with people, but with jars. Hundreds of them, each filled with his own urine. To outsiders, it was grotesque, but for Hughes, it was control. His mind, ravaged by untreated OCD and extreme paranoia, couldn't bear contamination. He lived in darkened hotel rooms, naked, gaunt, surrounded by tissue boxes, with only his grotesque collection as company. Every jar was a symbol of order in a world he could no longer manage. When Hughes died in 1976, emaciated and unrecognizable, investigators found these jars lining the walls like silent witnesses to his decline, a disturbing museum of isolation. Mae West, the Queen and her dolls. Mae West was one of the boldest women to ever grace a stage. Outspoken, seductive, and self-assured, she built a career on controlling her image. But away from the limelight, West indulged in a peculiar obsession, a room filled with male dolls. Each doll, meticulously crafted, was modeled after one of her former lovers. She dressed them, perfumed them, and spoke to them daily. Visitors described it as stepping into a shrine, a place frozen in time, where West could rewrite her own romantic history. Psychologists later speculated that West's doll room was her way of maintaining control in a world where men and studios had always tried to possess her. For Mae, the dolls couldn't betray her. They couldn't age or cheat or leave. They were eternal admirers, forever at her command. Gloria Swanson, the Skeletons of Beauty. For Gloria Swanson, the silent film legend who starred in Sunset Boulevard, beauty was both her weapon and her curse. As she aged, her fear of decay became almost spiritual. In her private home, she kept a collection of human skeletons and anatomical models, each perfectly preserved, cleaned, and arranged. She claimed it reminded her of mortality, of what lay beneath glamour. "We are all bones," she once told a close friend. Yet those who saw her collection said it felt less like philosophy and more like obsession, a desperate attempt to control what time would inevitably take from her. After her death, most of the collection mysteriously vanished, perhaps hidden away by family who feared how it would alter her legacy. James Dean, the Collector of Death. Few names carry the weight of James Dean, a symbol of rebellion, beauty, and tragedy. But before his fatal crash, Dean had an eerie fascination with car wrecks, funerals, and photographs of dead celebrities. He reportedly kept a scrapbook filled with newspaper clippings of fatal accidents, and he often drove to the exact sites where stars had died. Friends thought it was a morbid curiosity. Others believed it was prophecy, that Dean felt drawn to death, sensing his own approaching end. When his Portia little bastard took his life in 1955, those who knew of his collection found it hauntingly fitting. His obsession had come full circle. Bela Lugosi, the coffins, and the cape. Bela Lugosi, forever immortalized as Dracula, could never escape his most famous role. As his career declined, the line between man and monster began to blur. In his small Los Angeles home, Lugosi kept a collection of coffins, some full-sized, others scaled replicas. He slept in one on occasion, claiming it helped him feel at peace. Alongside them hung dozens of Dracula capes, some worn to shreds, others meticulously folded and labeled. It was said that when he died, he asked to be buried in one of his beloved capes. That wish was honored. To Lugosi, the coffin wasn't death, it was identity. In a world that had forgotten him, it was the last thing he still owned. Joan Crawford, the children's room. Joan Crawford, known for her fierce discipline and icy perfectionism, had a secret collection that shocked even those close to her. Inside her mansion, she maintained a hidden room filled with her children's old toys, clothes, and letters, preserved exactly as they had been years earlier. But this wasn't nostalgia, it was control. Crawford was infamous for her strict parenting, immortalized in Mommy Dearest. Former housekeepers claimed she would spend hours in that room, cleaning and rearranging, sometimes talking to the empty space as if her children were still there. It was her private stage, a place where she could relive motherhood on her own terms, with no disobedience, no rebellion. Only silence. Montgomery Clift, the shrine of regret. Montgomery Clift was one of the finest actors of his generation, a man whose beauty and talent defined post-war cinema. But after a near-fatal car crash in 1956 that shattered his face, Clift withdrew into darkness. He began keeping a private archive, hundreds of photographs, notes, and film reels documenting his own face before and after the accident. His apartment became a shrine to his former self. Friends described it as unbearable to visit. Every surface was covered with images of the man he used to be. It wasn't vanity, it was grief. Clift was mourning himself, the person fame had built and tragedy destroyed. When he died in 1966, much of that collection was destroyed before police arrived. His friends didn't want the world to see how far he had fallen. Vivien Leigh, the Theater of Shadows. Vivien Leigh, the luminous star of Gone with the Wind, lived a life haunted by beauty, brilliance, and bipolar disorder. In her home, she kept a private theater, not for performances but for solitude. Behind the stage curtains, she maintained a collection of mannequins dressed as her favorite characters. Scarlett O'Hara, Blanche DuBois, Cleopatra. She would sometimes sit among them for hours talking to them, rehearsing lines from long-forgotten plays. It was her way of holding on to the roles that had defined her long after her health and memory began to fade. When her husband, Laurence Olivier, discovered it, he quietly had the mannequins removed. Leigh never forgave him. Errol Flynn, the archive of scandal. Errol Flynn lived fast, died young, and left behind chaos. Known for his charisma and scandals, Flynn secretly collected court documents, newspaper clippings, and love letters detailing his own controversies. He stored them in a locked chest labeled My Defense. It contained evidence from his trials, intimate photographs, and letters from lovers, some written under pseudonyms. For Flynn, this wasn't vanity, it was insurance. A record of his truth as he saw it, in a world eager to define him as villain or hero. When his estate was auctioned after his death, the chest was never found. Some believe it was destroyed by his family to bury the last traces of his notoriety. Marilyn Monroe, the fragile archives. Marilyn Monroe's home was filled with mementos of loneliness disguised as glamour. She kept hundreds of notebooks, letters, and drafts of poems, fragments of her thoughts, fears, and dreams. But there was one secret drawer that stunned everyone who found it after her death. Inside were photographs of children, none of them hers. Some were autographed by fans, others were anonymous. Each had a note in Marilyn's handwriting. If I had lived, maybe she'd look like this. To the world, Monroe was sex and sparkle. But In that drawer, she was something else, a woman who longed for a life she could never have. Her collection wasn't disturbing in the macabre sense. It was haunting because it was so human. The silent toll of stardom. These collections, strange and sad, were never meant to be seen by the public. They were coping mechanisms, confessions without words. Each jar, doll, skeleton, and photograph told a story about what it costs to live under the constant gaze of fame. In Hollywood's golden age, privacy didn't exist. Studios owned your name, your image, even your body. The only space left untouched was your mind. And for some, even that wasn't safe. When we look at these stars now, preserved in black and white perfection, it's easy to forget the loneliness that shadowed them. Their collections were the one place they could be honest, about fear, about decay, about the parts of themselves they had to hide from the world. Conclusion: the ghosts behind the glamour. In the end, the disturbing collections of these 11 stars aren't just curiosities. They are mirrors of the human condition. They show that fame, stripped of its illusions, can become a kind of slow madness, a gilded cage built from applause and silence. Howard Hughes found order in filth. Mae West built a kingdom of dolls. Gloria Swanson surrounded herself with bones. And Marilyn Monroe, the world's brightest star, collected ghosts of a family she never had. Their possessions were more than obsessions. They were messages from the other side of fame, reminders that behind every perfect photograph lies a hidden world of shadows, and that sometimes the most disturbing things are not what they owned, but what they could never let go of.